Welcome, Dan Smalls, to the Dream Life Club podcast. It is so great to have you on, and I am so excited to share you with our audience today.
I'm excited to be here. Anytime I get to talk to others about my journey and hopefully have some nuggets of wisdom that came out of what I've learned all these years, it's a super fun day for me.
Oh, thank you so much, and for sharing
Yeah.
your time and wisdom. We're going to get so much out of this. I can't wait.
Cool.
Okay, so first tell me, you have now been called one of the top 100 promoters in the world, concert promoters in the world. And I want to know how this story I want to know how this story started. If I understand correctly, you were a kid from the Catskills and
Yeah.
now you're one of the top promoters in the world. Tell us the origin story.
Yeah. Well, it's very funny. I grew up in the Dirty Dancing Catskills, I like to say, and most people
Right.
who've seen that movie know exactly what I'm talking about. All those hotels were there, but it was also 7 miles from where Woodstock happened, and I was born in 1970, so my folks were there. I was not conceived there like many other people were, but they were at Woodstock. My dad had a
Okay.
motorcycle, so they went in and out. But I grew up in a very musical sort of town, and one of the coolest things that happened is that I had such an affinity for great music. My dad was into folk music in that era, and he knew Arlo Guthrie at the Gaslight Cafe in New York City and stuff. So it was
Mm.
around me, but I never like played an instrument or never got really into it. I was a kind of an athlete and a kid whose school came really easy to. I was
Okay.
valedictorian in my high school and like a top five skier in New York State, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I got offered a spot at Cornell University, and everyone said you should go be an engineer. So, because I was good at math and science, I'm like, sounds great, let's go do that. And my
Okay.
third day there, I was still a little homesick, and I was walking to see a friend on another part of campus, and I heard music coming out of a fraternity house. And I walk in, and there's the band Blues Traveler, my age, just out of high school. No one knew who they were.
Oh my
And here I
gosh.
am, making friends with a band. I start booking
Wait,
them
what
at other
year was
places.
this?
This was 1988. So there really
1988.
wasn't a jam band scene yet. It hadn't really become a thing. There was the
Yeah.
Grateful Dead, right? But that's what there
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So I got to know them, and they were my age, and we were fast friends. And before I knew it, I was booking them at fraternity parties and pairing them up with other bands from the era. And I sort of got confronted by the local version of me at the time who said, "Why are you doing shows and taking them away from my nightclub downtown?" And it was the first like inflection point of my life. What do you do? Do I say, "Screw you, I'm going to do this myself," or should I come work for the guy who was me of the era, promoter in town?
Wait, what do you mean taking them away from the nightclub? Like you were
So I
doing
was
your own.
booking bands that he wanted to put in his room, but I was putting them in frat house parties and,
Okay.
places on campus, like
Right.
nights that they should have been at the club downtown. This club was
Right.
called The Haunt. It was a legendary nightclub in the time. It only had a 300 or 350 capacity, but we were so perfectly situated between New York and Toronto or Boston and Philly. Like it was the place we could get those off night shows with bands that were generally too big. And so I went to work for him, and before I knew
Okay.
it, this guy named Trey Anastasio from Burlington called us about bringing his band Phish down to the club. And the first time they came, three people came to see them. Literally, it was like that early in the
Oh
era,
my
and
God.
so we grew with all of these bands, and as they got bigger, we started putting on shows in theaters around the region, and I really learned the business from John, and he was a guy who was huge in the reggae and blues scene, so I learned a ton about music from him. And there was no business for Ithaca, New York, to have the best blues and reggae club in New York State, but somehow we did.
That's
And then he
amazing.
let me take chances, and get to know agents as they were coming up.
Yeah.
One of my best stories ever is I paid Pearl Jam $250 and only 40 people came to see them when their first album had just come out. It was that early in the
Oh
game.
my God.
Yeah,
What an
so
amazing time to be like coming up.
it was crazy, like, and then the jam band scene really just took off. And so to tie my worlds together, one of the summers, let me back up and say I went from a 4.0 straight A student to a 1.7 my first semester at Cornell and realized I'm not going to be an engineer, but I should learn business. So I moved over to
Okay.
the business school and got
Okay.
that degree. But while I
Got it.
was doing that, I was working at the club. And one of the summers, I heard some news that some guys from New York City were going to do a series of shows with all of these sort of jam bands, the Fishes and Blues Travelers and whatever, but also Ziggy Marley and the band and bands like that, right near where I grew up. So I went down one day and I found the guy in charge and I talked my way into a job. And it just so turned out that it was the son of the legendary promoter from San Francisco and New York City, Bill Graham. His son David was in charge.
Okay.
So I talked my way into a job there for the summer, and we put on a series of really cool events and became this fun place for New York City folk to come hang out on the weekend. Like musicians and artists and stuff would come up to this dude ranch with horses in the country, and we did these great shows on the weekend. I mean, Lenny Kravitz was there when he was married to Lisa Bonet, and they were
Okay.
around. And it was just crazy, the
Epic.
people who were around all
Yeah.
weekend. And
Yeah. This
the
was while
last
you were in college or
while I
after?
was in college,
Okay.
1991. It was the
Okay.
year before like the Horde tour, which was one of the first tours of all those jam bands together around the same time that Lollapalooza became a thing and all of that. So the last weekend, Bill Graham, the father and the legendary promoter, comes into town to watch the operations. And
Okay.
it just so happened that his son David and all his friends were several years older than me. They partied a little more than I did, and I was just so into the job that I worked my butt off. And
Yeah.
I think Bill saw that, and he took us all out to dinner on the last weekend, and he says, "Cornell, get over here." And he calls me over to the bar, and he's like, "I really like what I'm seeing with you. You should come work for me when you graduate." And I said, "Wow, that is amazing. This is going to be so cool." So I went back to college while all my friends are interviewing for jobs, and I'm like, I'm set. I'm going to San Francisco. I got this great guy to work for. And the irony was he came over on a boat to avoid the Nazis in World War II and settled in Brooklyn, and then wound up spending his summers literally in my hometown at the Concord Hotel as a busboy. And he started running poker games, and soon enough, that's how he learned to be a promoter and got in the business. So there's this great
Crazy.
similarity. I've always sort of like wanted to live up to what he stood for. And he was a promoter who did things a very special way and cared about artists and cared about um, taking care of the fans. Like he would hand an apple out on the way into every band or whatever. Just had these great little extra touches that made it really
Mm.
special. And I think I learned a lot from him. And the sad part was about a month before I graduated college, he was in a helicopter going to see Huey Lewis in Golden Gate Park, and they clipped a wire and the helicopter crashed and he passed away. So
Oh
my job
no.
never came to be.
Oh
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Okay. So
End of
when
an era. But
so oh my gosh. So you just kind of gleaned from him then, like looking at what he had done over his career, and you never
yeah,
actually got to work for him.
no, I mean outside of that summer, but I mean he was
Mm.
around, and there's some funny stories that he's told, and
Hmm.
I think that weekend the sheriff came and was giving us grief, and I just went over and was like, Joe, I've known you my whole life," and Bill
Yeah.
saw that, and he was like, he just saw a lot of me in him, which is one of the coolest things that's ever happened. I did never get to work for him, but it sort of felt like a vindicating moment of, okay, maybe I can do this with my career.
Yeah.
Maybe there is room for me in this giant world of
Right.
of corporations.
Right. Because you okay, and then since then you've stayed totally independent.
Yeah, so what happened next was I didn't know what to do, and I stayed at the Haunt for another year, and all these jam bands were getting bigger, and the Phish shows were in 2,000 and 3,000 seat rooms. But I had also helped Spin Doctors and other bands like that, and through them they all got record deals and they were putting albums out. So I got offered a job at Columbia Records in New York City, and I took that job in '93. And I went down to New York, and the thinking I'm going to be the Frank Sinatra song, I'm going to make it there, whatever. And
Hmm.
I quickly realized that I had a different soul for music. It was the era of shipping tons of CDs, and the album charts were based on what was shipped, not what was sold. And it just felt very corporate in like this bean counting world, and it didn't ring true to me.
Mm.
And I happened to meet a young woman from Boston and said, "Okay, I'm going to quit this job and move to Boston and see if I can get in the business out there."
Okay.
And so that was the
You
second
mean a
time I
love
started
interest
over.
that took you to Boston?
Yeah, yeah, kind of like
Okay.
Goodwill Hunting, right? I got to see
Okay.
about a girl. I went to Boston,
Okay.
and um,
Got to see about a
so
girl. Love that.
yeah, exactly. I got a job there booking a band that had a terrible name, but it was a really cool pop band called Angry Salad.
Okay.
It was the era of all those like sort of what I call pop is that sort of like upbeat alternative rock era. And
Yeah.
while I was booking them, there were all these young bands that we work with the artist development reps at different labels at this company I work for called the Planetary Group. Um, I was booking little mini tours for these bands that were on EMI and Columbia or Capitol and
Mm.
other albums like that. And I can say that I booked Five for Fighting and Marcy Playground and Train and
Mm.
this band called Kara's Flowers that changed their name to Maroon 5 in 100-seat rooms for $100 a night, when I was 20 whatever years old.
Yeah.
Very cool era, but also kind of peripheral to where my soul and my heart was. I
Mm.
wasn't promoting shows. I was, basically a booking agent at the time, and um, it wasn't for lack of trying, but we were sharing office space with another promoter at that time, and the gentleman I worked for did the promotion for that company, and the company was called Great Northeast Productions. The guy's name was
Okay.
Dave Werlin, and
Okay.
by getting to know him, he said, "Well, maybe you should come work for me, and you can be a talent buyer, and we'll produce shows together." So
Okay.
it was a pretty easy transition back to
Okay.
being a concert promoter. And so I worked for him starting in 1996. And our claim to fame was not the 150 or 200 shows we did a year, but we were based in Boston, but we did most of our shows in the surrounding areas because there was this guy named Don Law who'd been there forever, was one of the biggest promoters, and every city had a guy like that. And we were sort
Yeah.
of the little mini thorn in his behind. We do a show every once in a while in Boston, but the majority of what we did was Portland and Burlington and Portsmouth and Providence and all the surrounding mini cities around Boston. But
Okay.
our claim to fame was that we both had this Phish connection, and Dave had a much bigger one than me. So we started to produce their end of summer tour camping festivals. And now this
You
is the
started
era.
to produce the Fish end of summer tour.
Right, in
Okay.
their festivals. And this was the
Okay.
era before Coachella and Bonnaroo. None of those had happened. And
Yeah.
Phish would end their summer tour with a 2 or 3 day event in the
Mm.
Northeast US that the first year was called the Clifford Ball. We did it in Plattsburgh, New York, and we drew over 40,000 people for the weekend, which was really
Oh
massive.
my gosh. Now,
And
was
that
that
was nothing until we
okay?
watched the next year. The next year was 70,000, and we moved it all
Okay.
the way to northern Maine. And then the Millennium
Okay.
one in 1999 was almost 100,000, I think, or a little
Okay.
more than that in Florida. So
Wait a minute.
we
Is this
did
just Fish or is this like a
just Fish.
festival? Just
Nope, just them.
Fish.
Mhm. They were at
Okay.
the peak of their
Yeah.
popularity back then,
Yeah.
and it
Okay.
was amazing. Like we would build these venues out of decommissioned Air Force bases because they were so easy to use. They had fencing and towers and buildings and places to sleep. And
Wild.
and
Okay.
then they would have a runway where we could park the cars. And next to this 2 mile long runway was grass where they could camp. And at the end of it was this big open space where we could build a venue. And it was
Wow.
life changing. Like the stuff we pulled off was really, really cool. And
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
lucky times, like just stumbled into a situation that made a lot of sense and worked for another good guy. However, like everything else in my life, things changed in the industry next. So I'm sure you and all your listeners have heard of Live Nation, and they've been in the
Uh-huh.
news massively lately with the Ticketmaster stuff, but whatever. Before they were Live Nation,
Yeah.
it all started with a guy named Bob Sillerman who had done the same thing with radio stations. He bought as many as he could and rolled it up into this big corporate thing. And he did the same with concert promoters. And it was originally called SFX Entertainment. They bought
Mm.
um, Don Law in Boston and Delsner Slater in New York and Jam in
Okay.
Chicago, or the one in Chicago and the one in Denver and and even Bill Graham Presents after Bill passed all became part of this
Mm.
big corporate time. And the agents we worked with, it was no one knew what was coming. No one's called it a monopoly, but they were, afraid because everyone that represented the acts seemed that they had to work with Live Nation. They didn't want to upset them by working with independents like us, and
Right.
it really made times difficult. So we were lucky to have the Fish event, but we weren't doing as much as we used to because of the roll up in the corporatization of the music industry that was happening.
Okay.
So it
Okay.
was an interesting time.
But like, how does that work? So
Yeah.
basically, like, as what became SFX Entertainment, you're saying like started to control all of the tours and all of the booking and the shows for like the major acts at the time.
At the time, I don't know that they weren't there yet. That's where they got to in the end, and that's where they
Mm.
are now.
Mm.
There's still room for indies, mind you, because we're surviving. But
Hmm.
at the time, it was so new and novel that I think the agents that represented the acts were like, I can't piss these guys off
I
because
see. They
they
all.
buy the entire Dave Matthews tour and plink it into rooms around the country. Like it's
Mm.
just things like that were what were happening. It was novel and new, and I get it. Like I don't know how much to trust this guy. I do 20 shows a year with Dave, but I do 2,000 shows a year with Live Nation. So it just created this sort of new dynamic in the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And
Mm-hmm.
guys like us were we were some of the casualties early on, and
Mm-hmm.
then Fish decided to take a break, which they
Mm-hmm.
did for a number of years. So Dave and I came to the decision that maybe I should look for something else to do, which made sense. I understood where he's coming from. And it was fortuitous in a good and a bad way, in that they were starting to build the Bethelwood Center for the Arts on the original Woodstock site, right near where I grew up, which is now a 25,000 seat outdoor venue. And at the same time, my dad had been diagnosed with cancer and was sick. So it was a good time for me to say, I'll leave Boston and go back to, the
Mm.
seeing about the girl didn't work out, but it was great for my
Okay.
career.
Yeah, yeah.
I moved back to the Catskills for a while and
Okay.
helped get Bethel Woods off the ground. And then when that contract was up, my dad was doing better, but he wanted to retire. So I worked for his company, which was a contracting business, for about 8 months or a year until we found someone to buy it and take it over.
Okay. Okay.
So
Wait, what
I,
kind of
I ran
contracting?
another business that I didn't know much about at the time, but it
What kind
was,
of contracting did that
they
business
did
do?
plumbing, heating, air conditioning,
So a
stuff like that.
totally different field.
Oh, it made no
Okay.
sense to what I was doing. I mean, granted, when I was a kid, I'd worked for him in the summers, but
Right. Okay.
I wasn't doing the business. I was
Right.
digging holes and running pipes, that kind of
Right.
things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you kind of helped your dad take it, like you took it over from him and then sold it?
Yeah, yeah, helped them through it. I worked there with
Mm-hmm.
them for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to answer the guys' questions. I found that the foreman was really really smart. He knew the business, and I talked him into understanding that he could run a business, and he and his wife have been running it ever since we sold it. And my mom was
Got
able
it.
to retire too. And unfortunately, the cancer came back years later, and we lost him about 12 years ago. But
Okay. Sorry to
it
hear
was a
that.
good time to like reassess again, and
Mm-hmm.
when I lived there for that year, it was not, I mean, it wasn't the Catskills of the 60s. It was pretty
Mm-hmm.
run down, there wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
lot for a, you know, approaching 30 or early 30s guy to do. So I was in New
Mm-hmm.
York every weekend. It was only 80
Yeah.
miles away, or I'd go back to Boston, or I'd come up to Ithaca where I went to
Mm-hmm.
college, and I always loved it up here.
Mm-hmm.
And as fate would have it, I met my wife on one of those trips, and after we sold the business, I moved up here thinking my days in the music industry were over. And this was 2004-ish.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Because then since then it's taken a big turn. Okay.
Yeah, well, what happened is I didn't know what I was going to do. So for the first 6 months, I was supposed to be consulting with the new owners of the plumbing business, and I was going to be down there 1 or 2 days a week. It turned into like driving down in the morning and driving back at night. It was so easy every other
Okay.
week. And I was getting paid, so it was great. But while that year was progressing, the first place I ever did a show in Ithaca outside of Cornell's campus was at the State Theater in
Mm-hmm.
downtown Ithaca. And it was a 1,600 seat building that's turning 100 years old in 2 years. But it was really close to being knocked down and turned into a parking lot because no one knew how to book it. No one knew how to run it. It was owned by a historic preservation organization at the time. So in what hindsight is a great idea, but at the time felt like the dumbest thing I ever did, I went and met with the executive director of the preservation company and said, "Hey, I'm the guy. I can fix this. Why not?" Right?
Something
And
in you knew you wanted to get back in, and that
I
was like
don't know. I
reminiscent of your Phish
maybe,
concerts, maybe like
yeah.
turning it. I don't. Okay. Okay.
But it was torturous. I didn't know the level of debt. I didn't know any of what I was getting myself into. It
So
was
you
like
bought it, or how does it work?
no, so I went to work for the not-for-profit to
Okay.
stabilize it at the time. This is just DSP is just a few steps ahead of this. But so I went to
Okay.
work there, and I realized very quickly that they had no idea what they were doing, and that my contacts in the industry were still there. I hadn't talked to them in a year or two, but all those agents were like, "Oh my God, Dan, now you're
That's
in
not
Ithaca. I'm going to
long.
sell you
Yeah.
all these shows."
Okay.
So I had the credibility, I had the
Yeah.
buying power, I had the smarts to put shows on. But the company that owned it was so right before I moved back, they were probably about $1 million in debt, which was, manageable. They brought on a young man to book it who tried to be the cultural hand of God and bring in these like performing arts center type shows, which
Mm-hmm.
in some markets make a lot of sense, but in a town like Ithaca that has Cornell University and Ithaca College,
Mm-hmm.
who do their own programming and have those same things
Mm.
and sell, they're $10 tickets for these kind of things. You can't put the
Right.
same show downtown for $50. It's like, I don't know, when you're up on campus, like here's an iPhone that I could sell for you for $1,000, but you can have it for 200. You would sell
Yeah.
a ton of those at $200, but
Yeah.
not at the downtown price. So by the time his first year was over, it was almost 4 million in debt.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And that's what I didn't know when I took the job, but I found out very quickly.
Okay.
And we went through the rest of that year, and I booked a bunch of really good shows. And I realized at the end of that year that the historic organization was not escrowing the ticket dollars. So we got to the last show of the year, and they didn't have enough money to pay the act. So I was lucky enough to know some very wealthy local business people and banks who I went to with the one weekend business plan and
Mm.
said, "This is what we need to do. You need to help me find the town to give us the money, give us a loan to put this off, and blah, blah, blah." And 2 weeks later, we went to the Urban Renewal Agency and got a $4 million loan and did this complex, property transfer and everything else. And we spun off two buildings downtown. Historic Preservation took over this building called the Clinton House. State Theater of Ithaca Inc. was born as a not-for-profit. And we paid off all the debt, had a much more manageable thing. And I don't know how it happened as quick as it did, but I was very lucky to find the folks who believed in my model for this place. And at the same time, I said, I'm going to run State Theater of Ithaca Inc., but I'm also going to start my own company and we'll build towards a place where I'm the exclusive buyer for the room and we hire an executive director to take care of the building. And over the course of about 9 months, we brought that dream to reality
This
and
is
started
wild,
with a
Dan. You just
stable
keep
thing.
doing like one huge thing after another. Like, how did you have the insight or like the the foresight to imagine like what this could be and take the risk and go out and
It's
pitch it
funny.
to
Yeah, it's
banks?
funny you
Like
say
that
that because
takes a lot of like vision or like faith in what you see, right?
I felt like every time I was right at the precipice of greatness, I would get hit over the head with a hammer,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like Bill dying or the fish taking a break or what or the
Mm-hmm.
corporatization. This time it was that debt. It was like, holy,
Mm-hmm.
what do I took a job without them showing me, I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
it's on me. I probably should have asked more questions, but I didn't know how bad it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I worked
But
my
also,
way
like,
through
someone
it.
else may have just, like, quit. Like, you didn't
Yeah.
have any stake in it at the time, right? Like, you
No,
didn't
no. And
have to stick around.
yeah, I didn't. But it was near and dear to me. I love this
Mm-hmm.
town. I
Mm-hmm.
love that I don't have to be in a major market. So at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, they knew that within 6 months I would start Dan Smalls Presents Inc. at the time, which was my homage to Bill Graham Presents Inc., which is
Uh-huh.
his company.
Okay. Okay.
And
Beautiful.
that was 2007.
Okay.
And by 2008, I think I'd booked 62 shows. I had found someone to take over as executive director of the building. So the
Okay.
model I created is not standard for a building like this, but there was
Okay.
two parts. There was the not-for-profit that takes care of the building, and then
Okay.
they had a relationship and a contract with my company to book as many shows as I could in there.
Okay.
So DSP, Dance Smalls Presents, started with just the State Theater, and there was a 200 or 300 cap club across town that I would do some shows in.
In
And the
addition.
year it was called Castaways at
Okay.
the time. So that was one of the rooms that I put stuff in. And like by the end of year one, I'd done about 60 shows.
Okay.
And I
Can you
probably,
explain can you explain to the listener like how it
yeah,
actually works with like producing promote like the
sure.
difference between being a promoter and a booking agent and like how it works to
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
get
yeah.
the thing going?
Well, there's a lot of ways, but at this time, I was a promoter, which meant I took 100% of the risk on all of the shows I did. So every band has an agent. Well, most, bands at the touring level, the
Mhm.
national touring level, generally have a manager who handles their business and an agent who handles their bookings. They're paid, various percentages that, they negotiate in contracts. So my friends were at agencies and I knew a lot of managers too. And
Mhm.
but generally the procedure is promoter talks to agent, agent talks to manager, manager talks to band, and then they
Mhm.
come back through the cycle.
And by
I've
agent you mean booking agent basically?
Booking agent, right? So
Okay.
that's the
Okay.
CAA, the William Morris, but also the independents at the time, the High Road Tourings and the Arrival are, all of the, and
Okay.
they change a lot too. Like there's been mergers and splits and whatever. But
Yeah.
yes, the agencies were where I had the closest relationships. And I think that's how I really leveraged the State Theater into a successful organization by booking at first things that the town liked, but also things that the students would come off So Ithaca's based at the bottom of the south end of Cayuga Lake, and on the East Hill is Cornell, and on the South Hill is Ithaca College. So we want to get the kids off the hills down into town at the same time. So I would book the Emmylou Harris and Arlo Guthrie and Lyle Lovitz of the world, but at the same time I was booking the Nico Cases and Modest Mouses and bands
Okay.
like that, to try and get the kids off the
Townsmen plus college kids, both the
Correct.
interests.
Right,
Yeah.
because I mean, in a
Hmm.
town like this, we have three economies. We have tourism, we have colleges, and we have wine. Those are the things that the Finger
Mm.
Lakes are known for, right? We're the
Hmm.
eastern version of Napa Valley or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because of the lakes. So that's all there was, and I figured the State Theater could be number four. People will come
Yeah.
here to see shows, and people were being underserved in the other markets, the Syracuses, the Rochesters, the Binghamtons of the world, the bigger cities near us, but for some reason, I was able to make it happen in Ithaca in the early days of DSP with, doing 15 or 20 theater shows a year. And so this was 2008, right?
Okay. That's right
I, like
around the
any,
time when Coachella started, right? Like when the whole
yeah,
backlash against Ticketmaster started and
all it was going on through then. I mean, at the
Mhm.
same time, like when Phish took their break, Bonnaroo became the big festival because most of our staff that did the Phish things went to work for Ashley Caps down there, and they, as much as I wanted to do more in when we'd build these events for Phish to go backwards, I always wanted my boss to say, "Hey, we've already built it. Let's do a indie rock fest the next weekend on the same site." And I
Yeah.
think he was just really comfortable in what he was doing. So,
Mm.
but yes, at that time, the festivals were beginning. Um, there was the few really big ones, there was Austin City Limits and Coachella and all of those were starting to become really big things. But I was really small again, like
Mm.
just this
Mhm.
this little guy up here that was, but at the same time, I had a mentality of how I was going to do it that was different than most. It was never, I've never from day one of my own company let money be the motivator of why I
Mm.
book a show or don't. It was always, how can I give a better experience to the artist and the fan? Like
Mm.
when a show was sold out, I didn't just do what was on the rider. I'd call the manager and say, "Hey, what's Lyle into? Lyle Lovett." And they say, "Oh, what he misses on tour the most? He loves to have a Shiner Bock beer after every show." So I called a friend in Austin when they weren't distributing it here and had them FedEx me a 6 pack or 12 pack of his favorite beer, and I'd have that backstage. Things that weren't
Little
easy to
touches
do.
that, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's
From
amazing.
day one, that's kind of
Mm.
how we tried to do it. And the same
Mm.
with the fans. We wanted the coming into a show to be a good experience and not and buy from the minute they look to buy a ticket.
Mm.
That's where you have to be perfect, in my opinion, right?
Mm.
You
That's
don't
where you
want
start like the fan experience journey.
100%,
Mm.
100%. There's a million ways to go wrong, and all you ever hear about is the mistakes you make. You don't hear
Yeah.
about the good very much.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we focused on that from day one. And I
What
say
kind of things
we,
did you do? Like you mentioned, Bill Graham used to give apples out to
yeah,
people in
yeah.
line, right?
I
Like,
mean, it was more so like never cutting the catering, making sure the
mm,
restaurants that we brought food in were really good. Because I thought about these guys. They live on a bus, right? They finish a show, they might get a shower, they get on the bus, they sleep in this coffin-sized bunk. While they're sleeping there, they're driving to the next city. They wake up, half the time they don't know where they are, and they go in these dingy basements of old theaters and
hmm.
clubs. It's not Xanadu
It's
like
not
some people think,
glamorous.
it's
Yeah,
not.
right.
So how can I make that better for them? Like
Mm,
whether it's comfortable furniture or just renting little touches like that. So we started with that, and we've stuck true to it over these last 19 years of doing this. Like as I've grown, so the rest of the story is I was on my own in 2008, and I brought on some interns from colleges, and they really
hmm.
helped. But
Hmm.
it really became a thing. I had a friend. We used to go to music conferences, South by Southwest and Polestar and APAP in New York City, and I met a guy named John Sanders, and we got to be really good friends. He was the me of Northampton. Now, he
Mm.
wasn't booking for himself, he was working for another guy that I don't want to say bad things, but he was not well liked in the industry for how he treated acts. He was the opposite of
Okay.
how I did things. But
Okay.
John was his talent buyer, and John was an amazing talent buyer. And we would communicate over who we should book and what we should pay them because Northampton and Ithaca were very similar, college towns and
Mm.
educated populations. And so around 2011, I started lobbying him to leave. I'm like, you don't like the guy? Come work for me, with me,
Yeah.
whatever, we'll figure
Yeah.
it out. It took me 3 years to convince him. And
Okay.
in 2014, he was finally ready to make the jump, but he was not in a position to buy in. So I had to make an interesting decision, which was, do I believe in this enough to bring him on, pay him more than I pay myself, because that's what he needed,
Wow. Okay.
and then agree to, if it worked, to slowly start gifting him percentage
Equity.
of the business.
Okay.
And it was a really good decision in that because when we merged, we just doubled business. And then once we
Mm,
got better at that, we doubled again. And it was just mind blowing to see how well
mm,
we worked together.
okay.
So that dynamic really worked out well, in that I probably made the same amount or slightly more for half the company over those next 7 to 8 years, um, than I would have if he could have bought in. It didn't put
That's
him in a
amazing.
bad situation. It was a really risky choice, but it
Hmm.
really paid off for us. So,
Okay.
I still have that one extra vote in the company now, but we've
Okay.
grown from doing 62 shows a year to last year we did over 800. And
So
our
where are
our
you doing these shows now? Like, is it
yeah, so our
still in
territory is
mostly
much bigger,
much
much
bigger?
bigger. So
Okay.
we sort of, when John left, a lot of Northampton came with him to us. So
Okay.
we do a lot of shows in Northampton, Massachusetts. We have clubs there, we have theaters there. We do, we have exclusive relationships with about a dozen rooms where we book 100% of the shows. And this goes back to your question about how we do it.
Mm,
Um, the majority of our business, I'd say 60 to 65% of our business, we take 100% of the risk. We rent the room, or we have the exclusive in the room. We pay
mm.
rent, we pay advertising, security, you name it, we're paying it.
Oh,
We
okay.
we bet that is, when people ask me what I do, I say I gamble for your enjoyment. I'm a
Ha ha ha
professional.
ha 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 ha.
I bet that X people will pay X dollars to see X act on X night in X city. There's a lot of X's in
Right.
there. And, luckily we're right about 85% of the time. So
Okay.
we've grown to, 65 to
You
or
never
so.
ask the bands to take like have a take the risk, take any portion of the risk if they don't sell a certain number of tickets.
It's not really like that anymore. I mean,
Okay.
we do have relationships like that with some acts where we'll do a
Mm,
split of the gross, or the
mm,
net, excuse me, at the end.
okay.
But nobody cares about me or my name on a poster. They care about the band, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Mm-hmm.
important part. But
Mm-hmm.
so just to go back to answer your question, then I'll come back to more of the methodology. But
Mm,
um, we we work from Boston to Buffalo. We work down in the Hudson Valley. Um, you
mm-hmm.
know, uh, Probably 450 of those 800 shows we have 100% of the risk on, and the rest of them are clubs where we have a signed contract where they'll pay us either a flat fee for the year or a percentage of the artist take to book those shows where they take the risk and all the reward. So it's a nice little
Okay.
mix of, and we go from 200 capacity up to 10,000 capacity in some of our
Oh,
spaces.
wow.
So
Okay.
there's a lot of diversity, and what we really pride ourselves on is the stuff we do in summer, where we go outside to a place like, you see these amphitheaters everywhere, but our summer shows are in beautiful spots where we take a field and turn it into a venue for the summer, like at an
Mm,
apple orchard south of Syracuse, or at Treehouse Brewing in Western Massachusetts. And we'll do 20 or 30 shows a year outside, sometimes more, at some of these breweries that are just, that we really get to put our stamp on them. Like you show up to a place and people want to get there 3 hours early, and they bring their families, and they have this great experience and great food, and then they slide into the concert venue that's attached to all this stuff. And it's really amazing, and it's really fun. And at the same
oh,
time, we treat the artists the same way, in that they feel almost like it's an off day, where at the end they have to play a show. So they come at it with just this great feelings, and the shows are always more spectacular, I think, than other places, because they're not in some concrete building, or a place that you don't know what city you're in. Like, oh my God,
mm,
this is so beautiful. They show up, they get in an RV tour of the apple orchards, and they see the cannabis they're growing for their CBD drinks, and they get that kind of an experience. It's like you give them a day off, where at the end they get to play a show. That's really fun.
wow.
You know.
I love that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
okay, so is that
that's my Bill Graham way. Now that I'm big enough to pull this kind of stuff off, how can I
right?
add that extra layer, to what we offer the
So
acts?
you're
And
making it like just an experience, really, not just a concert, not just a
totally.
show, but an experience for both the fan and the artist.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And that's how
Okay.
you grow, right? So my
Hmm.
growth has happened because an artist will come and we'll get the first show with band of horses or something. And they'll be like, oh
Okay.
my God, we've had the best day ever. So the next time they're in the Northeast, they want us to work in 6 or 7 other markets with them. Now, there's a lot
Yeah.
of history that we don't want to take it away from another promoter, but there are other
Okay.
markets to look at that they've sort of missed in the past.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
that's kind of how it's worked, and it's been spectacular. And I will say to you that the motivating factor isn't the growth, it isn't the money. It's always been this moment,
Mm.
whether it's outside at these shows or inside at a theater. There's the moment that whether we made money or lost, whether there's 10 people, 100, 1,000, 10,000, where the headline act walks on stage and the crowd erupts. You know that
Yeah.
moment, you're a
Yes.
musician, you get it. And
I'm an
I try to
artist.
be in
That's
the
yeah.
wings
Mm-hmm.
of the stage to watch that happen as much as possible, because that feeling, you don't think about how you did on the show when you see that happen. And
Right.
like I said, no one cares about DSP being on a show or on a poster. But to me, to have that moment, that's so unique and special, and it's so motivating that the rest takes care of itself. If you
Mm.
can create that synergy, um, where they're happy to be playing a show, even if there's less people than there should be there,
Mm.
you've done something right. And still it lets me be a guy who looks in the mirror at night and likes what I see, because I'm not trying to rip off the act or have two
Mm-hmm.
sets of books. It's just we'll grow through
Mm.
volume.
Mm. Have you ever had
Yeah.
a moment where you thought was like a huge failure that then turned around and turned into either a big lesson learned or actually like catapulted you into something?
I think there's been a lot of those. Like, losing my first job was a huge one. I mean, like I
Mm-hmm.
said before, there's moments where I feel like I come to this place where you just get hit over the head, and why am I starting over again? Thank goodness that this final chapter, and I don't think I don't
What
want to
about
say
in the
final,
final
but
chapter, like in the past, say,
oh,
10
here, I
years?
mean, look, we book shows all the time that lose money. Now, sometimes we do it because we know it's going to happen and we're trying to develop an artist, and grow from small clubs up to things. But sometimes you book something that's a slam dunk and it's Christmas come early and nobody buys tickets to it, but you
Mm,
can't find the reason why. I mean, we had
mm,
an act, and but those are the moments where you not only learn about your own fortitude, you learn about the what you've created and how other people look at you. So we had a show last February with an artist, I won't say the name,
okay.
but we'd worked with this artist 5 or 6 times, always sold out, always made money. And we were doing it at the State Theater in Ithaca on a Tuesday night in February, and we were paying them a large amount of money.
Mm,
And for some reason, we were like a fourth or a third of the tickets we normally sell. And we were upside
mm,
down well into the five figures, probably $60,000, and it was
okay.
terrible. And
Yeah.
um, the other thing I will say is that when the artists are on tour, they have a tour manager who does the business for them on tour, and that's who
Mm-hmm.
I deal with when I settle up and pay them money at the end of the night. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm backstage that night, writing the check to the tour manager,
Mm-hmm.
and the artist, who I know, comes back and is like, we didn't have so many people out there, Dan. I'm like, go away. I'm doing business. I don't want to, I'll talk to you later. And he keeps
Okay.
prying in. So I shut the door in his face
Okay.
and I wrote the check for the full amount, because you got
Okay.
to treat the wins and the losses the same.
The
And you hope that
same.
in the year you
Mm-hmm.
do better. You know there's going to be a few of these,
Okay.
right? And so I wrote the check, and then I went out and I had a drink with this act, and we didn't talk. I said, if you bring up money, I'm not talking to you anymore. So we had a glass of wine, and then we gave each other a hug, and out the door I went. And the next morning, the agent called me and said, we ripped up the check. Lottie Blah said he's not going to let you take the hit alone, and he reduced the fee by half of the loss that we had. So we
Oh,
shared it.
wow. Oh, wow.
And those are the moments that I don't know if you've seen the movie Goodfellas, but there's this line about how
Yes.
Henry finally had respect and he never had to wait in line for fresh bread anymore. You feel like you've come to a place where people respect you to say, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're in this
We're
together."
in this.
And I never asked for that. It was amazing that it happened, and it's happened a handful of times over the years. So I always believe that if we do it right and treat people with respect, you'll be okay in the end. And then
Mm,
sometimes you learn that there are acts that don't do things like that and they just
mm-hmm.
take the money and run. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the nature of the game. But
Mm-hmm.
and I learned this from my dad in his contracting business. Like, you can't look at one job and you can't look at one show. You have to look at the year as a whole and say, okay, that one sucked, but the other
Yeah.
800 were pretty good, and there's going to be 40 of them that suck every year. But
Yeah.
hopefully they're at the smaller level of risk and the big ones don't happen like that. So,
Oh,
it's
such interesting.
hard, because I liken what I do to being like a poker player, maybe, because you
Mm.
have to
You
pick a
have to bake
certain.
in a certain amount of risk or a
You
certain amount of
do,
failures.
but what
Okay.
level are you
Yeah.
comfortable, right? Are you playing
Yeah.
$1, $2, or $20, $40
Right.
poker, or
Right.
1,000, 2,000? So I've come to places where when I was in, when I worked for John Peterson at the Haunt, he would let me book my own shows, and I would lose money on those shows sometimes, and I'd have to go to the ATM in 1989 and drain every dime I had to pay an act and live off a sack of potatoes for the week. Thank God his wife would make me dinner a couple nights a week. But I learned that lesson, right? And I have tons of friends who work for other companies, Live
Hmm.
Nation, AEG, the big ones,
Yeah.
and I respect them. They're great buyers. They do great work, but they haven't risked their own money yet.
Hmm.
And there's a
Right.
different
There's a
level
difference.
of
Yeah.
this business when you got your own skin in the game. And I think having had that from day one, I still am blown away by the volume of business. I think we did $15 million plus in ticket sales last year. And
Okay.
I don't know where that ranks us because we don't report our, ever since Live Nation bought Polestar or have control, I don't report our shows anymore to know where we
Got it.
rank on the list.
Okay.
But
Okay.
back in the day, we were definitely top 30 or so in the US, which was pretty amazing
Okay.
considering a lot of the top ones were all those big companies and segments of them. So it's a mind-blowing place to be. I never thought we'd, I
No.
still look at us as a small company. There's
Well,
10
you
of us
seem to
now.
carry that like small company ethos, even though you're not small.
Mhm.
Like, I think
Yeah.
that, okay, that's so interesting. So, what advice would you have like a small act coming up, say like an independent artist, like looking to book shows, looking to kind
Mhm.
of maybe do their first tour? Like, what would you, at what point would you recommend is a good point to like get in touch with somebody like you?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's hard, because the challenge with that, I love to work with young acts. I really do. And it's harder and harder to do so because at our level, the majority of what we book is an agent who's got another baby band that's the opening act on that tour. I don't discourage folks from sending me links to their stuff. I'm happy to check it out, and I will sometimes say, "Hey, go talk to this agent," because I don't get to say I'm going to put a third band on this bill with these two bands that are playing, or I don't get that opportunity very
Mm.
often. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the
Mm-hmm.
power that folks think I do. And in some ways, even amongst the local scene in Ithaca, there are bands that think I'm the devil for that. And I'm like, you don't understand the
Mm.
business. It just
Right.
doesn't work that
Doesn't
way.
work that way. Yeah.
Um, but I have friends who do get it and want to tour, and I say, you should talk to this agent at this agency. I think they'd really help you out. But those agents have to come see you. So for me, what I say to young bands is you got to prove your worth. You got to play a lot of shows, but you can't play too many shows because then you make it like if you're playing every week somewhere,
There's no
it's not a
scarcity.
novelty to see you, and people are like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll just go see him next week, and then you
Yeah.
start having 20 people come, and that's not exciting, right?
Yeah.
There was a local band here in Ithaca called the Blind Spots, and they could sell 400 tickets at their height. And I would say to them, why are you playing at this brewery and this free thing on the Commons and this thing over here? Play once a month, play once every 6 weeks, make it a big deal. And I guarantee you're going to make more money in that one
Mm.
night than you would playing, six $200 shows. You're going to walk away with $4,000 in one night and then use the
Mm.
rest of that time to go play in other cities,
Mm-hmm.
instead of here. And they learned a lot from that. There's a tremendous music scene here, and
Mm-hmm.
I support them as much as we can. But it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard, especially like, bands want to. I get it. It's never been easier though to reach people on your own. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to have a record deal to make an album. You can gain traction in tremendous variety of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's just can you do it in a way that's not nauseating to the people like me. Don't jam
Right.
it at me every 10 seconds. Like, trust me, we're watching. And if
Mm-hmm.
you can sell tickets, we'll find a way to get you on a bill, and you
Right.
grow that yourself. And I'll advocate for you when that happens. I mean, we had a show with a hip hop act years ago when we had a club in Ithaca, which we don't right now, but we're working on it. And it wasn't selling very well. And there were already three acts that they're touring with. I said, look, I'm going to find someone local and put them on the bill and see what we can do. And I found this young kid from Ithaca College, and he brought 50 kids to that show.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I gave him $50 because he didn't even want to get paid. I'm like, here's $50. And those 50 tickets really made the difference for us. And I will put
Hmm.
that, I say all the time, I'll put him on as many shows as I can because he
Hmm.
worked hard and could draw some people and have it make sense. Like,
Mm.
it's not putting money in my pocket, it's making me lose less money. That's kind
Mm.
of how I look at that. So,
Mm.
um,
Mm. So if you, I
you
mean, if a
know,
band could like, or if an artist or a band could like guarantee a certain draw in a certain city, whether
it
it's like,
helps.
then would you say do like reach out to promoters, or like who's the best person to reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, you have to start with the clubs. Sure, they're going to get those opportunities, but if these clubs are doing a large enough volume of business, they're going to know a lot of the same people that we know in our place, right? So you want them to be a champion for you with the
Yeah.
agents they talk to all day, every day.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they want to
Yeah.
know because agents are always looking to sign someone new, but they can't be in every city all the time. So I've there's been hundreds of times where I've said to Joe Smith at CAA. Have you heard of this band in Chicago? I saw them at this thing. It was amazing. That's how it can start, as simple
Yeah.
as that. And then they go find you because my time for reinventing myself when I say that this is the last chapter, it's because it's the best chapter. I'm doing it
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm.
I've thought, can I manage a band? Would I, maybe 10 years ago I would have added it to our portfolio, but we've grown so much
Hmm.
that I have so many good friends who are managers. I'd rather say, hey,
Go
go
to
work
them.
with this guy and I'll get all the shows in the Northeast because of it, and
Yeah.
not have to reinvent who we are as a company in some ways. So
Yeah. Yeah. Totally
but
makes
we do
sense.
know a lot of people and can help, but I don't think we're the first line of making that happen in the
Right.
ways we might have been in the past. Like Bill Graham could make an act back in the
Okay.
60s. It was a different
Okay.
music industry,
Right. Right.
not the same now. There's just such volume and so many corporations.
Yes. So you have Green River Festival coming up, right? And
Hmm.
is that kind of that what you were telling me about earlier in terms of like in an orchard or like a day long? Like tell us
It's
about Green River.
similar.
Okay.
Yeah, this one had been around for 36 years when we bought it, and the guy that owned it was a friend of John and myself, and he had a little indie record label, very much independent, and it was very much grassroots oriented sort of thing. And it wasn't, I don't mean this in a bad way, it wasn't like the most professional, the
Okay.
fences weren't, it just didn't feel like a festival at times. It was, and that's
Mm,
cool. That's what it was. I think
mm,
our vision was to take it several steps higher, and we did it very quickly, which certainly cost us some financial strain the first couple of years. We had great bills, but we haven't made any
mm,
money on it yet. I think
mm,
this might be the first year we turn the corner, and if we can make money in year three of owning it, that's towards paying off what we paid for it. That's wonderful. I think that's what everyone looks for. But
hmm.
again, we don't let it's the closest I think we come to letting money be a part of it because we have to understand the budget in a much bigger way. And
Hmm.
festival, you say the word festival, and act is generally getting substantially more to play it.
Mm.
But it's a
Oh,
really cool
really?
one.
An act gets more to play a festival usually than a
Usually
regular
because
show?
it's a flat, right?
Hmm.
There's no back end to the deal. They can't
Mm.
come into a theater with 2,000 seats and get guaranteed 100,000 plus 80% after X dollars or something like that, how those deals work, right? So if you're coming to a festival, it's a flat amount
Hmm.
and you have to be willing to deal with sponsors on the stage and stuff
Right.
that you normally don't do. So there's
Right.
there's generally a little bit of a tax for that.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
ticket prices are generally higher too. So I
Mm.
get it. I don't necessarily love it, but it is what
Mm.
it is.
Yeah.
Especially at the lower level where you're paying bands almost 3x, instead of
Okay. Oh, wow.
1.5x or something like that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you're getting on those is a good thing. But I mean, this is a 3-day event. It's relatively small and boutique. It's 7,000 people a day. Um, and
Okay.
we got very lucky this year, with Geese really becoming a huge thing all at once. They're one of our headliners. And then Charlie
Yeah,
Crockett
Geese
on
is coming
another
up.
day and
Okay.
Spoon and Kurt Vile. So really cool
Okay.
there. Last year, I think we had Waxahachie and Mount Joy one year and Cake, and it's been just
Amazing.
great level of talent. But we've
Yeah.
really worked to have an international flair to it. And I think what we're hurting the most this year with the way the state of the world and the US government's
Yeah.
bad rules is we've had three or four of our international acts have to cancel because they can't get visas or they're afraid to come to the US right now, which is just terrible. It's terrible for the arts.
I hate that. That's wild. I have a song coming out called American Dream, and it's kind of about the death of the American dream that we all grew up
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I can't wait to
believing.
hear it. That's so cool.
Yeah, and so I love that you shared that and like the realities of some of these policies in action.
It's
Your
the stuff
bands
that
they're really
rounds it
putting in.
out,
Yeah.
to bring these acts from like, tiny little countries in Africa that come over to the US for
Yeah.
the summer. And, it's just, it's a shame that they're not going to get the
That's
width
so
of the
sad.
festival, the depth of the
Right.
festival that we've had in the past. But we
Hmm.
found enough that are here that are going to make it pretty cool,
I'm sure you
at the
did.
same time. But
I'm
that's the
sure you
beauty of
did.
it. We try to be really round, and
Okay.
the goal of a festival is to come away from it with three or four new bands you never heard of before that
Right.
you really want to check out, I think. So
Yeah.
that's our goal. We've certainly, like I said, we've made it a different level. A 7,000 cap festival doesn't need video screens, but we do it anyway, just to make it
Yeah.
feel like you're at a bigger thing. And
Got it.
but so to your answer, yeah, it's in a park in Greenfield, Massachusetts. There's nothing there except for some horse barns and spaces like that, and we create a vibe for sure out there.
This
And I think
sounds
that's
beautiful.
the
I want to
goal.
come out. Maybe I'll try to make it.
If you're
Um,
out, let me know for sure.
okay, well, last question for you. You've been doing this for 35 years. How do you keep the drive alive? How do you keep the magic alive? How do you keep being excited about what you're creating?
Well, I told you that moment. I mean, the moment of watching the artist and fan connect is amazing. There have been a lot of little moments that
Hmm.
keep it interesting too. Like, I've got a son who's just turned 18 in February, and
Oh,
he's
wow.
a recruited college baseball player going to play next year in Providence. So
Congrats
we're
to
really
him.
excited for that. So
Yeah.
the beauty of being in new markets really will help a lot for me. Like I'm not afraid to like take a shot in Providence or somewhere like that anymore.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
You're still growing. You're still pushing yourself. You're doing new things.
Yeah, look,
Hmm.
it was funny. We met through the Founders Club, right? But
Hmm.
I got the flu the day after Christmas or the day of
Hmm.
Christmas.
Hmm.
And I probably never would have sat down and done that planning session that they did, Aaron did. And I
Yeah.
went into it thinking it would all be about business, and I wrote this, I got the book here, that I did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I came out of it with like a whole new outlook on life. And there was a lot of personal stuff in it and personal growth. But at the same time in business, my answer was like, why am I afraid to go in another market? What,
Mm.
Live Nation would take that away from me in a heartbeat. Why,
Mm.
why should I be afraid? So we'll
Mm.
we'll roll the dice a little more in places we haven't before. We're working in markets and bigger rooms that we haven't as much before because I think we're a little more comfortable financially. Um, so yeah, it's exciting to do new things, and I'm continually shocked. I'll tell you a quick story. A couple
Yeah.
of years ago, my we built I built a FileMaker database that we run our company in. It's sort of our own. It started as a way to just keep our history of all the shows so we could see how X
Okay.
act did in X market. Now we
Okay.
do our offers, our settlements, our advertising. Like when my staff is settling a show in Buffalo and I'm not there, I can see the same thing on my computer and help them through it.
Okay.
Um, but the point is that oh, no, I lost my train of thought. Um, the growth of the company
Hmm.
has really put us in a place where we have to create our own ways to deal with it, I think. And that's the beauty of being independent. You don't have to live up to someone else's sort of guidelines. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
can pick the shows you want and the markets you want. So I think the story I was trying to say is that I came out of this not being afraid of new markets. I've been in a guy who finds solutions to problems as they come up,
Hmm.
and but at the
Hmm.
same time being humble enough to know that we're not going to get all the shows. We're going to read the New York City emails each week and say, man, we never get all the cool tours. I still get grumpy that certain things are playing
So
places instead of
funny.
for us. It's
Right.
but
Right.
we're Ithaca. We're secondary, tertiary markets. We're Northampton, Albany, Buffalo, Rochester.
Yeah.
They're places that no band has to play them, right?
Hmm.
A national tour is Boston, New York, Chicago, Detroit, the big cities.
Hmm.
We're the
Hmm.
second leg, third leg,
Hmm.
and there's 7 offers for every date that I get. So
Mm.
my job is to make it easy for you as an agent to say, that I'm going to play Ithaca because this is the best offer. It's the best people. We know the act's going to get treated right. I have to make it easy for you to say, yes, we'll play Ithaca, because there's
Mm,
other options. And it's not always about the money. It's about, like we said, how we treat people and the feeling about it. I don't know. I mean, I'm wearing a shirt with our logo on it, but I like that was where we started. I give those to the acts or things like that. I can't tell you how many times
yeah,
people have sent me pictures of them with Trey Anastasio on Instagram wearing my DSP show's winter hat or something, like
right.
little things like that really build the brand, even though I don't think the brand matters. You know what I mean? It
It
builds it
does.
within
You
the
mean it
industry
doesn't matter?
to the
Me?
public.
What do you mean to the public? Yeah, but it
I
matters
mean,
to
would you
you.
buy if I just said, "Hey, there's a DSP show at the State Theater tonight. You should come." Like,
Right.
who's
Be like, but who's
DSP, right?
playing? Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. But within the industry, and they say, "Oh, those DSP guys are pretty good guys.
right,
They're gonna do right by you."
right, right.
Uh, so that's
Yeah,
kind of how you goal. Yeah.
yeah.
It's
I
good.
think
It took
that's
me
so cool.
45 minutes to lose my train of thought once there. It's not too
Only
bad.
was not bad at all. I think that like growth, to me, like your answer is like growth and like continual like new ideas and new expansion like keeps you excited. Like you have the same business, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you're focused on growth. And I think for all entrepreneurs, that's what makes it new every day and exciting every day because you actually never know what new challenges are going to come up along the way.
The
It's never
growth
the
is
same.
organic, is what I would say about it. We don't sit down at our retreat, John and I, every year and say, "Hey, we're going to grow this year." We just say,
Mm,
is this venue working? Is that one? Should we do more in this place? Should we do more in that place?"
mm,
Like it's, and then the opportunities, I can't tell you how many of them come. My next call today is someone who wants to open a club in Binghamton, and I'm going to probably try to talk him out of it because he's going to lose whatever he puts in it. It's not a market. It's not a
got it.
viable thing right now,
Oh, interesting.
and that's a shame, but I think I'm successful because I know when to say no more than I know when to say yes.
Mm.
And it's a tough time for sure, in markets. We're seeing people spend less money this year. The gas prices are super high.
It's
You know,
crazy, the
it's
gas
a nutty
prices.
time right now. So
Nutty.
we're all in, but we're always 8 months ahead. So I can't
Yeah.
like dial it back.
Yeah.
I have to work my butt off to get people to come out this summer. And I think the
Right.
beauty of music and comedy and what we do is that people like to commiserate with each other
Yeah.
um, when times are good or they're bad because it's someone else to share your experience with. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of what we do. And like I said, I just want to do that in a way that at the end of the day, I can see myself when I brush my teeth at night and be like, wow, I'm proud of what I did today, and I didn't do it at anyone else's expense. And I've made money for other people
Mm.
and, made a little bit for myself. And, my share, you look at Live Nation, they're a publicly traded company. Their biggest shareholders are Saudi princes and things like that.
Mm.
My shareholder is this guy right here, that's
Mm.
who's my shareholder, that's the difference of how you look at business.
Yes.
And you can still grow to a really respectable level that still blows my mind by being true to what's in your heart and soul.
Mm. Well, Dan, this has been such a great conversation. I'm gonna take your advice and send you some of my music. See if you can recommend
Please
an
do. I want to
agent.
hear the one
Okay.
about the world, yeah, that
Okay.
especially. I want to hear about the American
Okay.
dream.
I will send you that.
Cool.
Thank you so much again for your time and your wisdom and your story, which I'm sure has been an inspiration to everybody listening. Just to, I don't know, take risks, follow your heart, do right by the people. Just so many
Yeah.
great little nuggets that
You
we all
don't
got
have
from
to
this.
follow how other people have done it because
Mm,
if you do, you're never going to be alone. You're never going to be different. You're just going to be the same. And who wants the same? Like I
yeah.
could have tried to be what other markets are, and I just no, I create like I did a talk a few weeks ago at this little music expo here in Ithaca, and I resurrected a TED talk I did years ago, and the whole story was like this. I find it better to tell my life story, and the things I've learned come out in the stories of what
Yeah.
I've gone through.
Yeah.
Ithaca was a microculture. We created one here that
Hmm.
made sense for this market. The same kind
Right.
of thing that we're doing in other places. I like you said, no two places are the same, and being the same isn't going to get you anywhere.
Right.
You're just going to get stepped on by the big boys.
And do you feel like you also brought your like authentic personality into the culture you created? Like was it kind of like your blueprint?
I think so. I mean, look, from the beginning, not to take this full circle, but it's a great way to do it, is
Mm-hmm.
that Bill Graham had a mentality for how he would do things, and not just
Mm-hmm.
to share things from my past, but I look at him every day. There's a bobblehead that someone once sent me of Bill Graham in San Francisco. And when I don't know
That's
whether to book a show or not, I sort of shake his head and does he say yes or no?
that's
That's my
amazing.
answer.
I love
But
that
no,
so
so Bill has
much.
come full circle with me in that, back then his name on a poster meant I'm going to go see this band. Like
I
one of my
see.
favorite Bill stories is, and I'll close with it, is the Doors came over for the first time, and he was
Oh
in the
wow.
Fillmore East in New York, and the first night, um, everybody had heard the Doors are amazing. I got to go see them,
Mm.
and so the show's happening. The manager of the Doors comes in. He says, "Bill, I can't believe it, sold out show." And Bill shakes his hand and says, "What a band!" And then the next night, everybody heard how great the first night was. There was twice as many people jammed in the club to see
Oh
them.
God.
And the manager and Bill connect at the back of the hall, and the manager says, "Bill, I can't believe it. This place is packed." He's like, "Yes, another sellout." And the manager says, "Bill, there's way more people in here tonight." And Bill says, "No, same number, bigger people." Same, same thing. So like there is a little bit of that sort of hilarity that comes with being a promoter, but
That's so
you
funny.
learn from back then though, his name on the poster meant I should go see them. I do want to believe that somewhere in their mind we have a little bit of that going for us. Maybe not with the public the way he did, but within the industry. Because everybody
Absolutely.
wants to help the smaller guy
Right.
fight the bigger guy a little bit.
Right.
Even if they're making all their money from the bigger guy, they still find ways to support us. And I
Yeah.
think we're very lucky that we have the relationships that we have.
I love it. I love what you're doing. Thank you for sharing your story and thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.